On Monday, we received a beefy update to Satisfactory, but perhaps it slipped by you. Well, today I'm going to cover the changes which you're going to appreciate, as well as some of the problems which I hope they're going to fix, as well as the question I seem to be asked every single day, which is, when is Update 8 coming to early access? Well, actually, let's start off with that. Update 8 in experimental has now been moved to Update 8.2, which is a substantial change because we've gone from Unreal Engine Update 5 to Unreal Engine Update 5.2.1. And you might be thinking, how can we move to Update 8.2 without releasing Update 8 to the early access branch? And that was in part because a lot of the problems cropping up in Update 8.1 would be fixed by updating to Unreal Engine 5.2. So I actually covered this in one of Coffee Stain's recent videos. And the good news is that with Update 8.2, that hopefully it's the last major update before they move to early access. And at the time they were expecting this branch to be an experimental for just a couple of weeks prior to moving to early access, which means fingers crossed we'll all be playing 8.2 by the start of November. I will mention though, because they have moved to an updated engine, that they may uncover a load more problems and have to fix them. It's just one of those things that may happen and it may push it back further, but the hope is start of November within the first couple of weeks if all goes as planned. Now, it certainly has been a long time in experimental, but in all fairness, it's really not every day that they make a substantial change to the game engine. So hopefully this won't be the case for the last few updates prior to 1.0. It's just one of those teething periods that we have to go through. Now, Unreal Engine has brought some huge changes to the game, and I'm still very much wowed by Lumen every time I open the game. However, Update 8.2 has also brought a heap of minor changes, including some incredibly cool quality of life changes, which I know some of you will love, such as building blueprints from the sampler. This is probably the biggest gameplay improvement in Update 8.2 that you'll be playing with, as we can now go to our dismantle tool and from here select a blueprint mode and then sample, which is the middle mouse button, the mouse wheel in my case, that button, to then copy and paste the blueprint, which is so useful. I'm using it all the time now. On top of this, we're now able to also nudge these blueprints and other buildables in a half-meter increment rather than just the 1 meter increments that they had before. And we can do this by holding down Control whilst nudging. Other items such as the power switches and pylons can now be rotated 45 degrees, and signs have had a huge placement improvement by now being able to snap to ceilings and face downwards, as well as the walls, and they have this freedom to be rotated without having to use pillars to kind of force it to work now. This actually makes them much easier to place and use them as lights within your builds, which obviously is a necessity if you're going to be using Lumen, which you shouldn't be using all the time like me, but rather only when you want to, see how cool your build looks with more natural lighting. Although I will state that there is quite a big problem that's come from this, at least for me, which is when you place your signs on rotated beams now, they seem to be thrown off their diagonal placement, and so you can't get them in the right position. This makes upwards or downward diagonal lighting particularly difficult to position, and it's quite frustrating. I found myself using a blueprint so far that I have with the signs already placed so that I can use that as a reference point to place my signs currently so that I don't need to use diagonal beams anymore. Other changes include railways now showing their signal blocks in color. Mergers and splitters can now be upgraded to smart or programmable versions, and that actually goes for power switches and priority power switches now as well. And if you're someone who enjoys manually mining your minerals, well, you can now do it by tapping E to toggle mining. We then have the new zipline sprint. This has actually been buffed a little, so you should be able to tell when you're sprinting. And a huge change is the ability to change your hotkeys on the go now by opening the hologram build mode of an item and then clicking the associated number hotkey that you want it to be. This is a great feature. I'm actually really enjoying it and finding it really useful, but I highly recommend from the get-go changing the hotkey for activating the system. It's set at left alt, at least it is for myself, and when I alt tab out of the game, that can cause a problem so that when you jump back in game, the game doesn't realize that you're not holding down alt anymore, and that's how that left alt problem comes, and sometimes you have to click it a few times in order for it to be back to normal. Well, the problem with that is you end up accidentally deleting all of your hotkeys while trying to change between the buildables. So highly recommend changing that from the get-go. Now these changes may sound pretty small, I do get that, they are quality of life changes, but there have also been a ton of fixes to update 8, and on top of that, some considerable optimizations as well. And speaking for myself, in this last update, I've actually seen an improvement of between 5 and 8% in my frames per second. That equates to between 3 and 5 frames per second more than what I had before. But since update 8 hit experimental right at the start, I've actually seen an increase in frames from 30 FPS to between 40 and 45 frames, generally speaking. So that's actually a considerable boost overall. That's 50% improvement on what it was. And I was struggling in early access at about 38 frames anyway. So I'm pretty happy with the improvements there. That being said, there are still issues that are prevalent in update 8.2. Many players have said that they've spawned into a new body. This is a common thing. It's not a major problem. You just need to find your character and then kill them. They'll be where you last saved the game. But there have also been major performance losses when running out of VRAM using Lumen. So if you use that a lot, you may encounter that. I know I have. And the first time you boot the game, it's going to be particularly slow to load up, among a few other things. Now, to be on the safe side with all of these updates, do remember to always back up your saves. And if you have any weird behavior, remember to verify your game installs. Perhaps there's been a corrupted file, or you've lost some files somewhere. But I do hope you found this helpful. If you do find that there are any bugs as well, I should mention, do check out the Q&A site and do post it on there, just so that they're aware of that in case they aren't. But guys, thank you so much for watching. If you did find this helpful, do hit the thumbs up. And I should also mention, if you're interested in seeing some Cities Skylines 2 content, then make sure to keep an eye on my channel, as I'm happy to say that I'm going to be covering it a lot over the next couple of weeks. Until next time, thanks does go to all of our awesome supporters on Patreon, most notably our Solarclipse patrons, James Owen, Firefless and Trebor, as well as our Lunas, the Calamity, Ben, Star and That Dude AW, as well as our Blood Moon of the day, which today is Papa Snoozy. Until next time, as always, ciao for now.